Hey everybody, before today's video starts, I wanted to let you know about something cool I did recently. Last week, I made a video with the San Francisco Shock on their YouTube channel. This was an accomplishment that I'm really proud of, so it would mean so much to me if you could check it out after this video. A link will be provided in the description. Now on to the recap. It's been a while. Things have been pretty slow. Luckily, the offseason has ramped up a bit recently, so I figured that now was a good time to try and break the silence. The Titans, Spark, Justice, and Mayhem have provided us with enough for a new episode. Let's begin with the most recent signings that have gone down, which means that first up, we will be taking a look at the Vancouver Titans roster reveal. Just a quick note, they only have 5 people right now, which means that they are short of that league limit, so you should be expecting at least another tank or like a DPS or something in the future. Oh, and by the way, you should consider checking out the roster reveal they made because you may hear a familiar voice somewhere in there at some point, if you know what I mean. As for who the Titans are rocking with this year so far, they have Masa, Aztec, Aspire, Shockwave, and False as their core. Vancouver desperately needed a shakeup, so I'm glad they decided to go this route. While it's obviously way too early to know for certain, I would say that they made upgrades at the very least. Starting with the support line, I believe that Masa and Aztec could be at least a little more consistent than Rolf and Fire. Masa, he's coming off a pretty good year on Atlanta. He's riding a high that saw him show off pretty solid Lucio play with a brig that looked much improved. He's also the longest active Overwatch League player on the roster, so you already know that he is going to be the leader of this team. He'll provide that veteran guidance and excellent communication and ult tracking that he made a career out of so far. One can only hope that he plays around the level he showed on Atlanta in 2021 though. While he should not be expected to play at as high of a level just because the Titans aren't as good as that Reign team most likely, and because of the fact that a main support really can only be as good as the rest of his team if you will, he's got to at least be 75% of what he was this year in order to be effective in my opinion. Masa showed me he is capable of adjusting. His second year in the league wasn't great as we all know, but he did work really hard to improve. A lot of my faith in Masa has been restored, so I believe there is reason to be optimistic about this pickup. What's going to be a bit more interesting to monitor though, at least in my opinion, is his new support partner. Aztec rarely played in 2021 because Lastro was simply the better option at the time. In my opinion though, this more so told us how little Toronto actually trusted him as their full-time starter. Lastro was picked up a good bit after Aztec was already signed, so if you ask me, he still definitely has a lot to prove. He's without a doubt one of the top players to watch carefully on this new Vancouver team. We really don't know what he's capable of at this level just yet. He kind of reminds me of Rappel when he joined the Outlaws after staying benched on the Titans in 2019. I really don't know how to feel about this pickup, but if my Vancouver fans want some positivity to look at in this situation, I encourage you to think about his past. Aztec was a reliable player back in his heyday on WGS Phoenix. He was the starter on that team, and he really did put in the work. His Baptiste in particular was relatively strong back then, and while he was not the number 1 or even number 2 guy on that dominant team in my opinion, he still did put in his fair share of contributions. We've seen what this guy can do at a playmaking standpoint. The potential is certainly there, so while there's reason to be concerned, I also think this could end up being a sneaky good signing if he does realize his true potential, and with a reliable player like Masa next to him, he might just figure it out. Finally, there's the tank line, which I'm a bit more unfamiliar with. False is a Canadian off-tank who has played for tons of American contenders rosters including Maryville Esports, Uprising Academy, and Bobby Wasabi, and another team you might have heard of, you know, American Tornado. Does that ring a bell? That's how good this guy actually is. Like, he's the real deal. He showed capabilities on all off-tank heroes, and he seems like a great person to take a shot on. As a young and hungry player, he could be a step up above Fried Wiener right from day one. He seemed pretty decent on all heroes throughout his time in contenders, so this might be something that's worth giving a shot on. It's not like the Titans can do much worse a tank than what they did last year anyway, so why not? Then there's the part of this roster that will easily turn the most heads, the DPS. Shockwave and Aspire is not a bad way to start. It's not a DPS duo that absolutely blows you out of the water, but both of these guys have shown they're very capable, and they have already proven themselves at this level. Shockwave in particular has literally already found success on this team, so I think a return for him here is pretty fitting. The Titans really went all in on pop-off potential with this kind of duo. Aspire and Shockwave are nasty when they get hot. It's great too because their hero pools don't really overlap all that much. Shockwave Shockwave can take care of the hit scan stuff while Aspire plays Tracer. On the other hand, you could have Aspire play the hit scan stuff instead if you want Shockwave to play like Echo or Hanzo. They have a lot of potential as a 1-2 punch. I'm pretty pumped to see what these two can do because, like I said, they've both already held their own against some great players in the past, so while they may be a peg or two below superstar level, they could still cause a lot of problems for the opposition. Generally speaking, I like the changes the Titans made. I could genuinely see this team climbing a few spots in the standings compared to 2020. I don't know if they'll be competing for a play-in spot or anything like that, but they should at least be more competitive compared to what they showed us in 2021. The Titans were not the only team to reveal their new roster though. The Hangzhou Spark did too. They decided to field Pineapple, alphaYi, Architect, Shy, Guxue, Bernard, Liege, Super Rich, and Irony for the 2022 season. The first thing I'd like to note about this roster is they promoted a ton of talent from their academy team, Bilibili Gaming. This team is crazy Spark-centric at this point, but also, Hangzhou are slowly but surely becoming a fully Chinese roster. The number of Korean players is now less than that of the Chinese players. So with that in mind, I'm very interested to see how they end up doing with communication. They're never going to have a fully Chinese or Korean lineup in there, so how are they going to communicate? Is it going to be in Korean, English, Chinese, all of them at once? That's like my one big concern. The possibility of them feeling divided, yet again, just like with last year, is very real. Hopefully things don't come to that though. Let's talk about the moves themselves now. I tend to think that their tank sticking around was a smart move. I like Bernard and Guxue a lot. I also really like that Architect and Shy are sticking around. They're both great. That's all good and well. I think as a result, the Spark have really put themselves in a decent position. They're building around their veteran core, and I would say they've been doing a pretty good job with said building. Let's begin with their new support line. Irony and Super Rich are going to be the guys moving forward, and while Super Rich is Chinese and Irony is Korean, I don't think it'll be too much of a problem. You see, Irony played flex support on the Sparks Academy team, which mostly consisted of Chinese talent. He's probably very capable of communicating back and forth between multiple languages at this point. And that's a good sign because when both of your support prospects have this much promise, you need a lot of good communication. Irony I'm not so familiar with, but I've heard a lot of good things. From what I can tell, he's got a reliable Zenyatta and Ana, and from all accounts I've seen online, he was a top flex support of Chinese contenders. Now, of course, we've seen the Spark pick up other players with the same reputation in the past, like with Coldest and Mika, but hey, it's still a really nice thing to hear, and maybe this time can be different. Super Rich, though, is the guy I more so have my eyes on currently, just because he's a name we've heard more than once in the past. He is a crazy good main support out of Team CC. When that team was at their peak, he was one of their best players, and that's saying something because that roster was beyond stacked. Most people would tell you that he should have been in the league last year, but the problem is, a majority of teams in the league don't really even consider Chinese talent. The Hunters did want him from what I know, but he did not like the strict coaching of RUI, and also, he did not want to accept an offer from the Valiant for obvious reasons, so that kind of left him missing out on the league entirely. So the fact that the Spark could scoop him up just a year later is insane. If we're being honest, as much as we love the guy, IDK wasn't really cutting it these days, and I think that Super Rich has a comparable ceiling, if not an even higher one at this point, since we have not seen what the man can do at this level just yet. This is very nice, and it quite honestly is a very powerful move that could tremendously benefit the Spark as they attempt to have a comeback year. Moving over to the DPS, the newcomers are Pineapple and alphaYi, who also both played for Bilibili. In some people's eyes, Pineapple is a strange pickup just because he is a hit scan player just like Shy. However, I don't really see it as weird at all. Pineapple was somebody I took notice of way back in the 2020 Gauntlet, and I really think he could help this Spark team take it to the next level. This guy is oozing with potential. He's got some great explosiveness to his game, lots of pop-off potential, and while his hero pool does show a fair bit of overlap with Shy's, there's one thing that he could definitely play that could help the Spark out a ton, and that of course is Tracer. Last year, Architect was kind of forced onto that role often, despite it not being something that he's really known for. And while he wasn't garbage or like the worst Tracer in the league, you could easily see an increase in productivity just by putting Pineapple in there instead. I think that Pineapple and Shy in like a Tracer Ash meta would be deadly. Or maybe they have Pineapple do hit scan, then have Shy play Echo. The possibilities are basically endless there, so really there should not be any reason to question this move. All it does essentially is make the Spark DPS line even more stacked. There's more pop-off potential, more flexibility, but more importantly, guys like Architect and Shy, they They can focus more on the stuff they're the best at, which means they'll be able to play even better. But don't count out alexyOWL either. He's another one of those guys that people seem to like a lot. This Korean flex DPS has a hero pool that's kind of comparable to Architect in the sense that he's a pretty good projectile player who could probably end up being a stronger Echo than Architect. And again, if you want Shy to focus more on the hit scan stuff, then alexyOWL is going to increase this team's effectiveness and flexibility in certain situations. I also have the sneaky suspicion that he could be the future replacement for Architect, kind of like what we saw with Feather taking over for Ivy on the 2021 NYXL. Because at the end of the day, Architect has been playing this game for a very long time, and there's no telling how much longer he's actually going to want to keep going. And there's no guarantee as well that the Spark are going to want to keep him forever. alexyOWL is going to have great synergy with a bunch of his Billy teammates here, so don't be surprised if Architect slowly but surely becomes a bench player. As an Architect fanboy, I hope this is not the case, but I also recognize it as a strong possibility. Either way, alexyOWL rounds out a nice-looking DPS core that could be a serious problem in the East. Looking at this team as a whole, the Spark have something nice here. They're rebuilding through their homegrown talent, and the ceiling seems to be decently high. We've seen teams in recent memory fail through this method before, but if there's one thing I have learned over the years, it's that you should never be underestimating the Chinese talent of this world. So honestly, the Spark might have something good here. What doesn't seem to be as promising though on the side of the Spark is what they decided to do with their coaching staff. To try and fix their awful situation from last year, the Spark signed Changgoon as their new head coach. And if you've been supporting my channel for a while now, you kind of already know how I feel about him at this point. To put it nicely, I'm not really a fan. His style and his approach to the game just leads to some wildly inconsistent results. We witnessed it for 2 whole years on the Dynasty. Sometimes he looked like a genius, and other times he'd make questionable decisions that would lose his team games. The Spark needed stability at this position, not more inconsistency. I really wish they decided to go elsewhere, but hey, what can you do? To look at it positively, I guess, sometimes people do just need a fresh start in life to be more effective with what they're doing. Maybe Changgoon just needed a new team. Generally speaking though, I'd approach this with a very cautious mindset if I'm a Spark fan, just because this is not something that gets you overly excited. There's a possibility he does better under a new team, but don't get your hopes up too much. What gets me, and probably a lot of you, way more excited though, is what the Spark chose to do with one of their assistant coaching spots. It almost feels dreamlike, but Miro is back. The Winston legend is about to embark on his Overwatch League redemption arc. While he unfortunately will not be redeeming himself as a player, this is still really exciting news and something that we all should be welcoming with open arms. Miro is very loved by this community. Many of us were saddened to see his career end in such a sad way on Season 1 Seoul. He's a great dude, a hard worker, and a huge part of this game's professional history. Words can't even begin to describe how great it is to see him back, because for a while, it kinda seemed like it would be nothing more than a dream and he'd never come back. But here he is now, a few years later. He coached Team Diamond for the better part of 10 months and the Spark liked what they saw. I'm pretty excited to see what he can do, because with all of his experience and knowledge that he has accumulated, he really could do great things. Something else I'd like to think about that you should too is how funny it is that the OG greatest Winston is now coaching a modern-day Winston god in Gushway that he probably influenced. The world truly does work in amazing ways. Either way, we can only hope that he helps Changgoon out and the coaching staff and, keeps them all on the right track. Fingers crossed. But yeah, that's what the Spark came up with for 2022. Not bad at all if you ask me. There's definitely some question marks and some concerns, but what matters is they built a roster that could help them win. And that's all you can really ask for at the end of the day, so good job. As we move on from the Hangzhou Spark, let's talk about the Boston Uprising, who arguably made one of the most controversial pickups of the entire offseason. Boston have decided to give MCD a chance despite the racist behavior that he showcased in the past. Surely this one is gonna upset some people, and it's understandable why. He did something pretty foolish, and it kind of raises questions about his character. MCD has since then apologized multiple times, so maybe there is a chance that he learned his lesson and he realizes that what he did was very wrong, but it's impossible to say for certain. Does he deserve a second chance? I'll leave that up to you to decide. If we think about it strictly from a player standpoint though, MCD definitely is a talented guy. He made a lot of big plays on the Spark last year before getting kicked off. He was arguably a top Ana player in the league, at least statistically, and he had a great Zenyatta. He He was a rather large difference maker for them, but the question is, was he worth it when they already had Crimzo? That's the question you have to ask Boston. In my opinion, it's fine from a personnel standpoint. As I said with Pineapple earlier, there's nothing wrong with having multiple talented people at the same place. Lots of teams have been doubling up on flex support, so it's not a huge deal. If anything, it only gives the Boston Uprising more flexibility. You might want Crimzo on BAP, but then you might prefer MCD's Ana, and think about double flex support metas. Their combined playmaking potential on something like Baptiste Zenyatta could be gross. So from a player perspective, I don't mind this signing. What more so concerns me is the potential PR nightmare that could come with this. You are taking a risk by signing somebody with a troubled past. Again, it seems like he's trying to redeem himself and he's back on the right track. He realizes that what he did is dumb, but some fans are bound to be upset by this because they think he's terrible now and he doesn't deserve a second chance. So what I'm looking to see here is how the Uprising and MCD handle this all. The last thing that the Uprising need is more internal issues because God knows they have dealt with more than enough of that over the years. This whole MCD storyline will be very interesting to follow. Boston actually made a coaching move too before we move on. After initially parting ways, Ascoft is back with the team for another season to be an assistant coach. It's a little weird to bring him back after they literally just parted ways with him like last month, but hey, Ascoft is a good guy, and he clearly knows what he's doing if the Uprising want to suddenly bring him back for a third year, so who am I to question it? Boston pretty much have a complete team now, by the way, with 7 players and 3 coaches, so good on them. They were pretty productive. Another news story that recently surfaced was the Paris Eternal bringing back Vestola after initially parting ways with him earlier in the offseason. This idea of temporary breakups just continues to get more and more common these days, I swear. But regardless, the move itself is pretty intelligent. The off-tank market is in a kind of weird state right now, so you might as well get somebody that you already know and trust for that matter. Not only that, but Vestola has great potential, and a lot of people believe that he never should have left this roster to begin with. You guys saw it firsthand last year. The Paris Eternal brought him in as an emergency signing, and he immediately made his presence known despite that. Even though he had to build up synergy with his teammates on the spot, Vestola was reliable. He wasn't like a top-tier player, but he was very consistent, and there's reason to believe that he's only going to get better as he spends more time on the Eternal. So if you ask me, this was a good decision. They're playing it safe and they're playing it smart. Also in the headlines for Paris, though, was a new assistant coach. They went ahead and picked up Mobugi, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, for the new job. What you need to know about this guy is that he recently coached for Gen G and Team BM in Korean Contenders, but he also spent a good amount of time on Gen A, aka the sister team of Gen G, so he honestly does have a good bit of experience under this Gen G / Seoul Dynasty, I guess you could say, system. He's been coaching since early 2019, and he seems like a potential diamond in the rough. Former coach of the Valiant, Packing10, has gone on record saying that he is one of his favorite coaches that he's ever talked with. Packing10 said that he would have loved to have him on his staff back in the day. I trust Packing's ability to recognize good character, so if you ask me, that's a huge W for Paris. Him and J-Mac could be capable of some great things together. Paris made some nice moves this week. Next on the agenda is the Florida Mayhem, who announced the signing of Someone as their new main tank, and yes, his name is unironically Someone. It's an interesting name choice for sure. However, don't let the randomness fool you there, because in 2021, he was pretty respectable on Team CC. His solid all-around tank play helped his team finish top 3 in Season 1 of 2021 Korean Contenders. Someone is another young talent who is only about to turn 18 on this Florida roster, which I believe puts that mark up to 3 in that regard. He's got some flexibility to him, though. Someone has played literally every main tank hero if you watch him. He does not limit your team in the slightest. In my opinion, his Rhine was a bit above the rest of his hero pool, but maybe that's just me. Either way, he comes from a team that raises pretty good main tank talent. As a reminder, both Fearless and Gaga played for Team CC in the past, and that's some elite company that he's a part of. It also means, though, that he could genuinely be on his way to an excellent career. I'm not exactly sure how he's going to do on an English-speaking roster, but I low-key think that he could sneak up on some people because the talent is there. It's just a matter now of if he can mesh together with his teammates. That puts the Mayhem's roster total up to 6 now, by the way, which means we are getting really close to a complete roster, as all they need now is a main support. Let me know how you're feeling about your team, by the way, Florida fans. I'm curious to hear your thoughts because I thought they were going to be worse than this, and I'm kind of pleasantly surprised. Obviously, they still have a long way to go, but still, just the fact that they're not as bad as they could have been is a positive sign. Anyway, capping off the player additions for today's video is an older one. The Washington Justice announced the signing of former Gen G main support, Opener. First off, we gotta get the joke out of the way. How on earth did they go from closer to opener? How did they manage to make something like this work out so well? Did they do this on purpose? Like, it's so crazy and funny. With jokes aside though, this one's interesting. His rise to the league came really fast. It was only like 7 months ago that he played his first game in Contenders. But even so, this guy's been grinding for quite some time. He played for Gen G's sister team, Gen A, for like 2 years. Opener has worked very, very hard to get here. And while him and Gen G really didn't accomplish much, I don't think it matters. Something I've come to learn with these exact types of players is that they can really sneak up on you if you don't watch them carefully. He worked hard to get his way through the ladder in a reliable system, and now people are starting to take notice of him. Sanguinar did a very similar thing back when he joined Season 3 London, so maybe this move has the chance to pan out into something. I'm not entirely sure what to expect, but I definitely am excited to see what this guy can do. Anything was better than what they had last year. I think that Opener and Vigilante as young players could really help this Justice team take a new step, and with a veteran like Krillin there guiding these two, maybe, just maybe, the Justice can have a more effective support line that isn't so passive. Next up, we should probably take a moment to address that Yakpung has retired from professional Overwatch. I know he's not a huge player in this game's history or anything like that, but it's still bittersweet to watch him go because of his story. We all got to witness this guy fulfill his dream of making the league just to have it taken away from him at the end of Season 2. Back then, he simply was not good enough and Toronto were kind of a disaster. So, as a result, he did what any motivated individual would do. He grinded like no tomorrow and he improved his skills on O2 Blast, and that ultimately led to the completion of his redemption arc here in Season 4 when the NYXL gave him a shot. It makes me happy to know that he proved the doubters wrong and was able to make it back here at some point down the line and, you know, kind of fulfill the prophecy, if you will. It's just a shame that he's gone again, this time for good. Either way, it was a beautiful story that I'm glad I got to watch play out. Whatever you do next, Yakpung, good luck, my friend. If you show anywhere near the determination that you did in your Overwatch grind, you'll definitely succeed in life. One other thing before we wrap up, in the world of coaching, the Atlanta Reign promoted their analyst, Danny, to an assistant coaching role. We can assume that he is going to be the guy attempting to fill in the shoes left behind by Unter, and if that's the case, good luck to him because it's not going to be easy. I still do have quite a few concerns that the Reign coaching staff might end up reverting, so big pressure is on Danny to perform to kind of keep the ship in the right place. Luckily for Reign fans though, this guy is pretty qualified. He was the team's analyst during 2018, which means that he has been there since the very beginning. He's worked with Sephi, he has experience, and at this point he probably knows what he's doing. He's a qualified person for the job despite never actually coaching a team before. He's got a young and bright mind, which just might be what the Reign need to continue being successful. But of course, he's got a lot to prove here, so we should all be watching how he performs alongside the Reign very closely in Season 5. But that's basically all I have to say about the Atlanta Reign section of this video, so that does it for the recap. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, subscribing and hitting that like button would mean so much, and let me know how you're feeling about the Spark and the Titans among some of the other things down in the comments below. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And as always, thank you all so much for watching my content. I really do appreciate it, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.